If you're studying for the INBDE, I highly recommend INBDE Bootcamp, an all-in-one study resource that will help you pass your exam. Use coupon code MENTALDENTAL for 10% off. Hey everyone, Dr. Ryan here, and welcome back to our oral diagnosis series. So now it's time for some practice questions. So I've written 10 practice questions covering the content we just went over in the last 8 videos on developmental disturbances of the head, neck, and mouth. I figured instead of waiting until the very end of the series, which is what I usually do, it would be good practice to test what you learned in this specific section of the series to cap off a fun chapter of lectures. Keep in mind that I've designed these questions to be very similar to the questions you might encounter on the INBDE, AFK, ADAT, and those kind of exams. So, practice question number 1. What is the most accurate diagnosis for this lesion? So go ahead and pause the video, think through this question, and then we'll go over it together. All right, so let's consider the options that were given for this ventral tongue lesion. Now, caviar tongue is the only answer choice with the actual word tongue, so that's interesting. Let's start there. Caviar tongue does in fact appear on the ventral surface of the tongue, but they're dark blue or purple sublingual varices, and they're not this white yellow color that the arrow is pointing to, so that does not seem like an accurate diagnosis for this lesion. So we're going to cross that one out. Oral lymphangioma are these pink, red, or purple bubbles on the tongue surface, usually the tongue dorsum, so that's not a great answer either. A dermoid cyst is a much bigger swelling and usually occurs on the floor of the mouth, not so much the tongue. By contrast, an epidermoid cyst could be on the differential diagnosis here because it does present as a yellowish bump like this, but that's not the answer that we're given, so we can rule that one out as well. And then we have the oral lymphoepithelial cyst. It's a small, whitish yellow, usually hard nodule that most commonly appears on the lateral or ventral tongue. It fits the description really well here, and that is in fact what this lesion is. So that is the best diagnosis. The answer for this one is B. Practice question number 2. Ectopic tissue from which salivary gland can cause a Staphny bone defect? Go ahead, read through those answer choices, pause the video, and then we'll go over it together. All right, so ectopic salivary gland tissue associated with the submandibular gland, which sits near the angle of the mandible below the inferior alveolar nerve, can cause pressure resorption on the lingual cortical plate of the posterior mandible. And if it does this, this causes a well-circumscribed unilocular radiolucency called the Staphny bone defect. The location of the parotid and sublingual glands, as well as the minor palatine salivary glands, does not match the location of where that Staphny bone defect occurs. So the answer for this one is B. All right, practice question number 3. Which of the following conditions exists in this case? So certainly read through that patient box so you know what's going on here, and then think through the question, pause the video, and of course, we'll go over it together. All right, so once again, which of the following conditions exists in this case? So we have a patient with 28 erupted teeth, not including the third molars or wisdom teeth, which is exactly how many teeth we would expect in a normal dentition. So the 16-year-old patient has no missing or extra teeth. Twinning causes an N plus 1 tooth number, and fusion causes an N minus 1 tooth number. So if the patient was experiencing twinning, they would have 29 teeth. Fusion would be 27 teeth. So neither of these answers is appropriate. Dens and dente doesn't present as a wide notched tooth, so we can rule that out as well. So we're left with either concrescence or gemination, which both cause an N or normal amount of teeth. Concrescence affects the root, while gemination affects the crown. Gemination is where you have one tooth bud that partially splits, so you have a larger than normal tooth with a bifid or notched macrodont crown, which matches the patient box description exactly. So the answer to this question is E. Question number 4. Median rhomboid glossitis is the result of atrophy of which type of papillae? Go ahead, read through the answer choices, pause the video, and then we'll go over it together. So the central red patch of median rhomboid glossitis, as well as the red lesions of geographic tongue, are the result of desquamation or atrophy of the filiform papillae, the most common papilla on the tongue. So the answer to this question is A. Practice question number 5. Each of the following syndromes is associated with clefts except one. Which is the exception? Go ahead, pause the video, think through this question, and then we'll go over it together. So Treacher-Collins and Apert syndrome specifically, these patients have a 1/3 chance approximately of experiencing cleft palate. And Cruzon patients have an elevated probability of clefts as well, although it's not quite as much as the other two. Beckwith-Wiedemann syndrome, by contrast, is associated with things like macroglossia, hemihyperplasia, and a general overgrowth of tissue. But cleft lip, cleft palate, or any facial clefting for that matter, is not associated with this syndrome at all. So the answer to this question is C. Question number 6. Each of the following is considered an inclusion cyst except one. Which is the exception? Go ahead, pause the video, think through this question, and then we'll go over it together. All right, so what is an inclusion cyst? Inclusion cysts arise from the inclusion of surface epithelium into deeper tissues, either through development or trauma. Epstein's pearls, bond nodules, and dental lamina cysts, dermoid cysts, and epidermoid cysts are all examples of inclusion cysts. Nasolabial cysts arise from the remnants of embryonic nasolacrimal duct tissue, or from misplaced epithelial remnants during the fusion of the maxillary, medial nasal, and lateral nasal processes. It is not an inclusion cyst, though. It's a fissural cyst because it's associated with the lines of fusion of these facial processes during embryonic development. So the answer to this question is nasolabial cyst, which is the only fissural cyst on this list. The other three here are inclusion cysts. Practice question number 7. What condition does this patient have? So go ahead and read through this patient box, take a look at the panoramic radiograph that goes along with it, pause the video, and then when you're ready, we'll go over it together. So this one is a bit of a trick question. Missing third molars, which this patient has one of them, you can see it right here, tooth number 32. Missing third molars do not count toward your congenital absence tooth count for any of these conditions. Hypodontia is missing 1 to 5 teeth, not including wisdom teeth. Oligodontia is missing 6 or more teeth, again, not including wisdom teeth. And anodontia is missing all of your teeth. So since this patient is not missing any teeth besides tooth number 32, they actually do not qualify for any of these conditions, not even hypodontia. So the answer to this question is D. All right, hopefully you're doing well so far. We only have 3 questions left. So practice question number 8 is, what are Fordyce granules primarily characterized as? Go ahead and read through the answer choices, pause the video, and then we'll go over it together. So Fordyce granules, by definition, are enlarged, slightly raised sebaceous or oil-producing glands that appear in hairless skin or mucosa. So of the descriptions here, the best answer choice is D, mentioning by name the sebaceous glands that become enlarged, that manifest as those bumpy mucosal lesions. Practice question number 9. Each of the following neck swellings typically presents on the lateral neck except one. Which is the exception? So go ahead, pause the video, think through this question, and then we'll go over it together. So here we're incorporating some information from both the oral lymphoid tissue and cysts video of this developmental disturbances chapter. So let's talk about how we can find the correct answer here. We can hopefully rule out the branchial cleft cyst and the cystic hygroma right away because those are both lateral neck swellings. They're always presenting laterally, so those we can definitely rule out from the list. We didn't talk about it yet, but a plunging ranula usually appears laterally below the submandibular space. But even if we didn't know that, as long as you know that the majority of dermoid cysts on the neck, the vast majority, occur at the midline, you could still answer this question without knowing the ranula information at all, because a dermoid cyst does not typically present on the lateral neck. It typically presents right at the midline as that rubbery, well-circumscribed mass. So the answer to this question is C. And lastly, question number 10. What is the most common facial birth defect? Go ahead, pause the video, think through this question, and then we'll go over it together. So let's go through the answer choices here. We have cleft lip, which affects approximately 1 in every 1,000 births. We have cleft palate, which affects approximately 1 in every 2,000 births. Lip pits, which are often associated with van der Waals syndrome, affect approximately 1 in every 50,000 births. And then exact statistics for double lip are challenging to pinpoint due to its extreme rarity, but we can estimate it affects approximately 1 in every 200,000 births. So of this list here, double lip is the most rare, followed by congenital lip pits, then cleft palate, and cleft lip is what we're left with. And that is, in fact, the most common facial birth defect. So the answer to this last question is A. So how'd you do? Hopefully you did well. Let me know in the comments below how many questions you got correct. And that'll do it for this first chapter of the oral diagnosis series. I really hope you enjoyed learning about all of those different developmental anomalies. And I'll look forward to seeing you again in chapter 2 of our oral diagnosis series. That's it for this video lecture. Thank you so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate it. I'd also really appreciate if you consider clicking that like button below this video, subscribing to the channel if you have not already, sharing this video with your friends, and leaving a comment below letting me know what you thought. All of those things can really help to grow the channel. If you want to go above and beyond supporting me and what I do here, please check out the Patreon page linked below. If you want to join there, you'll get access to exclusive practice questions, exclusive study guides, a Discord server, and so much more. And if you see at the end of my videos, I have an end credits screen, and all of those names there are the names of my amazing Patreon supporters that I'm honored to have. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.